6 a.m. Red and blue lights flood my driveway. I'm standing barefoot in my bathrobe on the lawn I've paid for every month for 3 years. The officer steps out. "Sir, we have a trespassing complaint on this property." Before I can answer, heels stab the asphalt behind him. Veronica Ashworth, HOA president, marches up like she's the queen of the cul-de-sac. "There's your criminal, officer. Illegal signage and defiance of lawful orders." She jabs a manicured finger at my 8-inch city-mandated sprinkler warning sign, 18 inches inside my own property line. "Remove that eyesore immediately," she snarls, "or arrest him for trespassing on HOA property." My property is suddenly HOA property? That's when the chill hits me harder than the morning air. This isn't about a sign. This is how they steal your house, one fabricated violation at a time, until the fines are bigger than your mortgage and the bank takes everything. What would you do if your neighbors weaponized fake police calls to take your home? My name's Garrett Rothwell. 3 years ago, I bought this house with my divorce settlement money, 22 years of marriage down the drain because I apparently lacked ambition. My ex-wife got the McMansion, I got enough cash for a fresh start and the freedom to choose my own battles. All I wanted was peace. A corner lot in Willowbrook Estates where I could rebuild my life without anyone's permission. 89 modest 70s ranch homes, mature oak trees that actually provided shade, and an HOA that charged $40 a month for snow removal and basic landscaping. That's it. The previous president, Mr. Smith, was 83 years old and shook my hand at closing with fingers that smelled like pipe tobacco. "We believe in leaving homeowners alone," he said, eyes twinkling behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Life's too short for petty arguments about grass height." Music to my ears. For 2 blissful years, that's exactly what I got. Saturday mornings smelled like sawdust drifting from my workshop, where I restored furniture and worked on my vintage Camaro. Classic rock echoed from the garage while I tinkered, and the biggest neighborhood drama was whose turn it was to salt the community center sidewalks. Kids rode bikes in the streets without helicopter parents hovering. Mrs. Patterson's garden gnome stood proudly among her roses. Mr. Kim flew his American flag every single day, rain or shine, though I later learned his son died in Afghanistan, making that flag more than decoration. Then the white BMW appeared. Veronica Ashworth rolled into Willowbrook like a perfectly manicured hurricane. Real estate agent, 47 years old, with shoulder-length blonde hair that defied both gravity and weather, and the calculating smile of someone who'd found her next project. She bought the Colonial across from the community center, prime real estate for surveillance operations. And let me tell you, she treated Neighborhood Watch like it was her full-time job. Within 6 months, she was running for HOA president on property values and community standards. Her campaign flyers featured before and after photos of neighborhoods where she'd implemented improvement initiatives, though the after photos looked suspiciously like suburban prison yards. During her door-to-door campaign, she knocked on mine at 7 p.m. wearing a Navy business suit like she was running for Congress. Her eyes swept over my driveway, lingering on the Camaro like it was a crack house, before dissecting my workshop garage like it was a festering wound. "Certain properties," she said, never using names but making her meaning crystal clear, "are undermining our collective investment potential. We need leadership that protects what we've built." Her smile could have cut diamonds. The election was a bloodbath. Most residents figured one person couldn't destroy a sleepy HOA that had coasted along peacefully for decades. Mr. Smith didn't even campaign, just shrugged and said he was ready to pass the torch to someone with more energy. He had no idea he was handing her a flamethrower. Under Mr. Smith's 5-year tenure, 3 violation notices total, all for legitimate safety hazards like Mrs. Rodriguez's cracked driveway. Under Veronica's first 8 months, 23 violations and counting. American flags became excessive patriotic displays. Yes, she actually fined Mr. Kim for honoring his dead son. Children's sidewalk chalk art was temporary vandalism requiring immediate removal. Mrs. Patterson's garden gnomes were non-conforming decorative elements disrupting visual continuity. The smell of fear started replacing weekend barbecue smoke. Neighbors stopped making eye contact. Backyard laughter grew whispered and nervous. But I flew under the radar until I upgraded my irrigation system. The sprinkler installation was completely legal. Permits pulled, city inspector signed off, everything by the book. But my 45 PSI system required warning signage under municipal safety code. One small aluminum sign, Automatic sprinklers active, water pressure warning. 8 inches tall, 18 inches inside my property line, exactly where city code mandated. That's when Veronica's crosshairs found me. Her email arrived like a digital slap. Urgent. Remove unsightly commercial signage immediately. I researched our bylaws until my eyes burned, the acrid smell of burnt coffee filling my kitchen at midnight. Commercial advertising was banned, but safety equipment? Protected under 3 separate clauses. My response cited specific bylaws, polite but firm. Her reply came within the hour. Daily fines of $50 begin tomorrow. The ice in my stomach told me everything. This wasn't about signs or aesthetics, this was war. The violation notice appeared on my door like a death warrant. Certified mail followed 2 days later. Veronica's signature moved to make everything feel legally terrifying. Official letterhead screamed, Willowbrook Estates Homeowners Association, in pompous serif font that probably cost more than my monthly water bill. $50 daily, effective immediately. Her justification? Aesthetic disruption under General Welfare Clause Section 4.2. I'd memorized our bylaws by now. That clause required significant community impact affecting multiple properties. My 8-inch warning sign qualified as significant community impact. The thing was smaller than a pizza box. The photography harassment started immediately. Every morning at 7:15, Veronica's white BMW would purr outside my house like a stalking predator. She'd emerge with professional camera equipment. We're talking telephoto lenses and tripod setup, documenting my criminal sign from 6 different angles. Click, 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 building her case like I was running a cartel instead of protecting pedestrians from sprinkler spray. I wasn't going down without a fight. That weekend, I surveyed 12 neighbors with the thoroughness of a door-to-door census taker. Only 2 had even noticed the sign existed. Mrs. Patterson actually thanked me. She'd been soaked by my old manual sprinklers while walking Winston, her ancient beagle whose arthritis made him slower than congressional legislation. That warning saved my blood pressure medication from water damage, she laughed, patting Winston's graying muzzle. His collar jingled past my window every morning at 6:30, loyal as sunrise and twice as reliable as our HOA board. Time to fight back with facts. I spent 3 nights researching everything I could find about HOA enforcement powers, fueled by burnt coffee and stubborn engineering curiosity. Turns out my background in navigating permit regulations at work was about to pay dividends. What I discovered in the state residential property codes changed everything. There's actually legal protection against exactly this kind of power trip. Any safety equipment required by municipal code cannot be restricted by HOA aesthetic rules, period. The state legislature passed this after too many HOA dictators caused actual safety hazards by banning required warning signs, fire lane markings, and emergency equipment. One case involved an HOA that banned fire department connection signs, then tried to sue the fire department when their trucks couldn't find hydrant access during an actual house fire. Armed with legal ammunition that would make a constitutional lawyer proud, I filed a formal dispute. Section 2. 7. Safety equipment exempt from aesthetic review when municipally required. Section 5.3. Prohibited signage defined as commercial advertising exceeding 12 square inches. My sign was 6 square inches of legally mandated safety equipment. Veronica's response arrived within hours, and it was a masterpiece of bureaucratic rage. She doubled the fine to $100 daily for willful non-compliance with lawful directives. $100. For a sign the city required me to post. Then came her nuclear option. An emergency board meeting to brand me a chronic violator requiring enhanced enforcement measures. The meeting was scheduled Thursday at 10 a.m., work hours, naturally, designed to suppress attendance from anyone with actual jobs. I burned personal time and arrived with a 47-minute PowerPoint presentation that dismantled her arguments slide by slide. City documentation, state statutes, photographic evidence proving full legal compliance. The 3 board members, all Veronica appointees who'd moved in after her election, sat through my presentation with the enthusiasm of hostages watching paint dry. Their glazed expressions told me the vote was predetermined before I'd even spoken. Final tally, 3-2 to uphold all fines. Democracy in action, folks. But here's where the real story began. After the meeting, Mrs. Patterson cornered me in the parking lot, glancing around like we were planning a prison break. the scent of her peppermint tea mixed with righteous fury and the lingering smell of community center disinfectant. "She's not just targeting you," she whispered, pressing a manila folder into my hands. "I've been keeping records of everything." The folder contained photocopies of violation notices I'd never seen. Mr. Kim fined for excessive patriotic display, his American flag honoring his son killed in Afghanistan. Jessica, single mother of 2, cited for children's chalk art lasting more than 24 hours. Mrs. Henderson threatened over bird feeders creating unsightly seed scatter. But the pattern that made my blood freeze was deeper than random harassment. Every targeted homeowner had questioned Veronica's authority in some way. Mr. Kim asked why flag restrictions weren't in the original bylaws. Jessica requested meeting minutes where chalk art was supposedly banned, minutes that mysteriously didn't exist. Mrs. Henderson had simply asked why her 30-year-old bird feeders were suddenly problematic. This wasn't about community standards or property values. This was systematic retaliation against anyone who dared ask questions. That night in my workshop, surrounded by the familiar smell of motor oil and wood shavings, I stared at the evidence spread across my workbench like pieces of a criminal conspiracy. My Camaro's engine sat half-assembled, waiting for attention I couldn't give while fighting this bureaucratic war. The sound of my sprinklers activated right on schedule. 24 zones of perfectly legal irrigation requiring that perfectly legal warning sign. Each spray cycle reminded me that I was right, she was wrong, and the law was on my side. But as I learned reading Mrs. Patterson's files, being right meant nothing when your opponent controlled the game board. Veronica wasn't just enforcing fake rules, she was building a dictatorship, one violation notice at a time. 3 weeks later, the lien notice arrived like a financial death sentence. Certified mail, thick envelope, the kind of official document that makes your hands shake before you even open it. Total amount, $650 in accumulated fines, plus $400 in administrative costs that materialized from Veronica's imagination like her legal authority. My mortgage company called that afternoon. The cheerful customer service rep explained how liens affect loan status with the enthusiasm of someone reading microwave instructions. Credit impact, potential acceleration clauses, all very routine. Routine for them, maybe. For me, it felt like watching my house slip away one legal document at a time. The stress was getting physical. Sleepless nights listening to every sound outside, wondering if Veronica was prowling around with her camera equipment. The constant taste of antacids became my new normal, washing down anxiety with chalky mint flavoring that reminded me how much my life had changed. Time to get serious help. I paid $300, money I couldn't really afford, for a consultation with Margaret Steinberg, a property attorney whose office smelled like leather-bound law books and the kind of expensive coffee that costs more than my daily HOA fine. HOA liens can absolutely force property sales in Ohio, she said, sliding her reading glasses down her nose with the casual delivery of someone discussing weekend weather. But here's something fascinating about your board president. Margaret had done her homework, and what she discovered made my engineer brain start connecting dots I'd missed. Veronica's real estate license created what lawyers call a conflict of interest, so blatant it practically glowed. I'd actually read about this during my permit work years ago. Board members with real estate licenses must legally recuse themselves from any lien decisions because they could financially benefit from forced sales. The state passed this law after too many coincidental foreclosures ended up as bargain purchases by the same board members who imposed the fines. Document everything, Margaret advised, pressing a digital recorder into my hands. Ohio is one-party consent for recordings. She can't stop you from recording conversations on your own property. I walked out with a strategy and borrowed equipment that would become my secret weapon. The documentation project consumed my evenings. Security camera focused on the sign area, capturing every one of Veronica's morning photo shoots in high definition. My 3-hole punch worked overtime as I created timeline files of every HOA communication. The smell of fresh printer ink became a permanent fixture in my kitchen, mixing with the aroma of reheated coffee as I worked past midnight organizing evidence. But Veronica had her own escalation plan. Her next move was pure desperation disguised as authority, a certified letter demanding I remove my surveillance equipment because it violated reasonable neighbor privacy expectations. She threatened additional $100 daily fines for intimidation tactics against board members. Like so. Intimidation tactics? The woman who stalked my property with telephoto lenses was accusing me of intimidation because I installed a camera on my own house. But here's where Veronica made her first real mistake. I researched Ohio surveillance law with the thoroughness of someone whose house was on the line. Property owners have absolute right to record any activity visible from their own land, period. My camera pointed at my own sign, installed on my own property, recording my own front yard. Her privacy expectations had about as much legal weight as her aesthetic authority, which is to say, none whatsoever. While I was building legal defenses, the neighborhood underground was mobilizing. Mrs. Patterson had been busier than a campaign manager, secretly contacting every violation victim and organizing what she called intelligence sharing sessions over tea and righteous fury. Jessica shared Ring doorbell footage of Veronica measuring neighbors' holiday decorations with a tape measure at 6 a.m., prowling through yards like some kind of suburban surveyor. Mr. Kim provided email screenshots where Veronica demanded written justification for his excessive patriotic display. Apparently, honoring your war-dead son required HOA board approval. But the nuclear revelation came from the most unexpected source. Mrs. Smith, widow of our beloved former president, approached me in the grocery store cereal aisle with a manila envelope that smelled like mothballs and contained dynamite. "Harold kept everything," she whispered, glancing around like we were conducting Cold War espionage. He never trusted that woman from day one. The envelope contained internet printouts of Veronica's pre-neighborhood real estate website. Her services included HOA compliance consulting for investors, helping buyers identify acquisition opportunities in community-managed developments through enforcement strategies that motivate seller decisions. She was literally advertising her ability to force people out of their homes. Cross-referencing public records revealed her systematic operation. 3 foreclosed properties in neighboring HOA districts, all purchased by mysterious out-of-state investors within months of aggressive enforcement campaigns. Veronica's name appeared as listing agent on every single sale, earning commission on both the forced sale and investor purchase. That night, I spread the evidence across my workshop table like a detective solving a murder case. The familiar smell of motor oil mixed with the scent of justice as Veronica's full operation became crystal clear. My sprinkler sign wasn't about aesthetics or property values. I was simply her next mark in a real estate scam disguised as community management, and my corner lot would make someone a nice profit after they foreclosed on my mortgage. The legal intimidation arrived on a Tuesday morning that smelled like impending doom and burnt coffee. Not just any letter, a cease and desist from Hartwell, Steinberg & Associates, printed on letterhead so thick it probably cost more than my monthly electric bill. The process server delivered it to my workplace at precisely 11:47 a.m., ensuring maximum professional humiliation as my coworkers watched through the conference room glass like I was being arrested for embezzlement. Immediate cessation of harassment activities and payment of accumulated fines totaling $1,847 within 30 days, or face foreclosure proceedings under Ohio Revised Code 5312.21. $1,847 for a 6-square-inch piece of aluminum that the city legally required me to post. The financial avalanche started immediately. My bank flagged my account over the pending lien, turning routine transactions into interrogation sessions. Trying to buy groceries became an exercise in explaining to 19-year-old cashiers why my debit card kept getting declined, like I was some kind of financial deadbeat. My credit monitoring app cheerfully announced a 45-point score drop with all the sensitivity of a tornado siren. I liquidated my retirement savings, $15,000 that represented 20 years of 5% contributions and compound interest. Money that was supposed to fund my eventual escape from corporate politics became lawyer fees and potential fine payments, all because Veronica decided my corner lot looked profitable. Sleep became a distant memory. Every midnight sound could be Veronica documenting new violations with her telephoto surveillance equipment. The constant ticking of my bedroom clock mixed with anxiety-fueled heartburn, creating a symphony of stress that no amount of antacids could silence. I started sleeping on my workshop couch just to escape the sound of my own thoughts. But desperation breeds thoroughness, and my engineering mind was about to strike gold. During one particularly brutal 3 a.m. research session, I discovered our HOA's constitutional Achilles heel. The original 1987 charter documents, buried in county records like legal archaeology, revealed something that made me laugh out loud despite everything. A sound that probably woke half the neighborhood. Every single one of Veronica's new standards violated amendment procedures. Any rule changes affecting fines require 67% homeowner approval through written ballot, not board votes or emergency meetings or imperial decrees from wannabe dictators. I'd actually dealt with similar municipal requirements during code updates at work, where citizen approval was mandatory for anything affecting property rights. Turns out democracy applies to HOA bylaws too. Who knew? Every fine Veronica had imposed was legally invalid. She'd been running a dictatorship with the legal authority of a mall security guard. But before I could celebrate my constitutional victory, Veronica launched her most vicious attack yet. The neighborhood newsletter arrived like Soviet-era propaganda, featuring my house on the front page under the headline, "Problem Properties Threatening Our Investment." The unflattering photos made my modest ranch look like a crack house, complete with dramatic shadows that would make a horror movie director proud. The article blamed declining property values on non-compliance issues from certain residents who refused to respect community standards. The social isolation was immediate and brutal. Elderly neighbors began crossing streets to avoid me, their faces carrying the shame of people convinced they were harboring a neighborhood criminal. Mrs. Rodriguez stopped her friendly porch waves. Even my mailman started giving me the stink eye like I was trafficking contraband through USPS. But Veronica's propaganda campaign contained the seeds of her own destruction. Marcus Webb, Channel 7 investigative journalist, received an anonymous tip about systematic HOA corruption. Someone in Mrs. Patterson's underground network had connected dots between enforcement tactics and foreclosure rates across multiple communities. Marcus showed up Thursday evening with the hungry expression of a reporter who smelled Emmy material. "I've been tracking organized HOA abuse cases," he said, spreading notebooks across my kitchen table with professional efficiency. "Your situation fits a criminal pattern we're investigating." 3 other neighborhoods reported identical scenarios: aggressive new leadership, selective enforcement targeting specific properties, mysterious foreclosures followed by below-market investor purchases. The targeted properties shared characteristics: corner lots, renovation potential, homeowners with limited legal resources to fight back. I provided Marcus with my complete evidence arsenal: timeline documentation, recorded conversations, photographic proof of selective enforcement, financial connections between board members, and investor purchases. The paper trail of Veronica's operation covered my kitchen table like a federal investigation. "This is RICO territory," Marcus said, photographing documents with equipment that probably cost more than my car. Pattern of civil rights violations, systematic fraud. We're talking federal criminal charges, not civil lawsuits. That night in my workshop, surrounded by evidence that could demolish Veronica's entire operation, I finally felt the shift from defense to offense. The familiar smell of wood shavings mixed with satisfaction as I organized the final pieces of her downfall. My Camaro's engine sat completed on the workbench. Stress had somehow sharpened my mechanical focus. But staring at the mountain of evidence, I realized individual resistance wasn't enough. I needed community mobilization, comprehensive media exposure, and coordinated legal action that would prevent future HOA dictators from terrorizing homeowners. This wasn't about my sign anymore. This was about saving every American family from systematic destruction of property rights, one fraudulent fine at a time. Time to declare war. The breakthrough came from the most unlikely source imaginable. Mrs. Patterson appeared at my door Saturday morning carrying a shoebox that smelled like lavender sachets and contained enough explosive evidence to level Veronica's entire operation. "I've been Harold's unofficial archivist for 30 years, she said, settling into my kitchen with the quiet satisfaction of someone about to detonate a nuclear bomb. That woman made one crucial mistake. She underestimated a retired librarian's filing system. Inside the shoebox lay every email, document, and communication that had passed through our HOA board for 18 months. Mrs. Patterson had been systematically copying everything with the thoroughness of someone who understood that power corrupts and documentation protects. The smoking gun was buried on page 47, an email thread between Veronica and Strategic Property Acquisitions LLC, dated 6 months before my sprinkler sign existed. Greetings, Ms. Ashworth. We're seeking acquisition opportunities in community-managed developments. Your expertise in enforcement strategies that motivate seller decisions is exactly what we need. Interested in consulting arrangement? Veronica's response made my coffee taste like battery acid. Absolutely. I've identified several target properties in my current community. Strategic enforcement actions can create financial pressure points to motivate quick sales. My commission structure is competitive for both listing and buyer representation. Strategic Property Acquisitions, LLC. Public records revealed they'd purchased 4 foreclosed homes in neighboring HOA districts within 18 months. Every property had experienced identical enforcement campaigns before foreclosure. But the conspiracy was deeper than commission schemes. Incorporation documents showed Veronica as a silent partner in strategic property acquisitions, meaning she directly profited from every home they acquired through her enforcement tactics. The business model was diabolically simple: manufacture financial crises through fraudulent fines, force foreclosure, purchase at below-market prices, flip for massive profits. I called Margaret Steinberg immediately. Her reaction was worth every penny of her consultation fee. "This is federal conspiracy territory," she said, voice carrying barely controlled excitement. Systematic scheme to defraud homeowners using color of authority, RICO violations, federal fair housing violations, wire fraud, the entire criminal buffet. Here's what every homeowner needs to know. HOA board members cannot financially benefit from enforcement actions under federal fair housing law. Any board member with financial interest in property sales must recuse themselves from all enforcement decisions, period. Veronica's operation violated 15 different federal statutes designed to prevent exactly this predatory behavior. Margaret agreed to represent me on contingency. She only got paid if we won. When experienced property attorneys take cases on contingency, the evidence has to be bulletproof. The Community Intelligence Network had discovered even more evidence. 8 homeowners had received violations in 6 months. Every targeted property fit strategic property acquisitions, ideal investment profile of corner lots, renovation potential, and vulnerable owners. Mr. Kim's pension made him prime target for financial pressure. Mrs. Henderson's fixed income couldn't absorb legal fees. Jessica's single mother budget had 0 room for manufactured emergencies. Each victim was selected based on inability to fight back. But Veronica made one catastrophic miscalculation. She'd targeted an engineer with obsessive documentation habits, unlimited research capacity, and stubborn pride to fight wars over principle. My corner lot was supposed to be easy. Divorced guy, working alone, no obvious resources. Instead, she'd awakened a methodical adversary with access to federal law, media connections, and a growing army of neighbors who'd realized they were fraud victims, not HOA violators. The power dynamic had completely reversed. I was no longer defending against violations. I was building a federal criminal case that would destroy her entire operation and protect every homeowner from future predators. That evening, I spread evidence across my workshop table like a general planning invasion. The familiar smell of motor oil mixed with approaching justice. Strategic property acquisitions had stolen homes worth $1.2 million, purchasing them at 60 cents on the dollar, generating $400,000 profits from systematically destroying families. Their fatal mistake was leaving paper trails connecting every transaction to Veronica's enforcement timeline. My sprinkler warning sign had become the thread that would unravel a criminal enterprise. Time to pull that thread and watch her empire collapse. The war room smelled like sawdust, determination, and the kind of industrial-strength coffee that keeps engineers awake for 36-hour problem-solving marathons. My workshop had transformed from weekend hobby space into federal case headquarters, complete with evidence boards that would make conspiracy theorists weep with envy. Margaret Steinberg arrived Monday evening with a briefcase full of legal artillery and the predatory smile of someone who specialized in destroying corrupt officials for sport. We spread out across my workbench like generals planning D-Day, surrounded by the familiar sounds of socket wrenches and my air compressor's therapeutic hum. Multi-jurisdictional approach, Margaret explained, sketching attack vectors on yellow legal pads. Federal complaint bypasses local courts where Veronica might have planted judges in her back pocket. State Real Estate Commission targets her professional license. Civil rights lawsuit under Section 1983 for deprivation of constitutional rights under color of law. The beauty of multiple jurisdiction complaints is mathematically elegant. Even if one case gets delayed or dismissed, The others keep grinding forward like unstoppable industrial machinery. Corrupt officials can manipulate local politics, but they can't corrupt federal prosecutors, state licensing boards, and civil courts simultaneously. But legal strategy was only half the equation. I needed community mobilization, which required becoming an HOA law expert faster than most people learn to program their cable remotes. I spent the following week studying residential property regulations with the obsessive focus that made me successful at reverse engineering complex mechanical systems. Ohio, revised code, federal fair housing statutes, constitutional property rights, everything connected like components in a massive legal machine designed to protect homeowners from predatory board members. During my research deep dive, I discovered something that changed my entire approach to fighting HOA tyranny. Most homeowners don't realize they have extensive protection under state and federal law because HOA boards deliberately keep residents ignorant of their rights. It's like car mechanics who don't explain what they're actually fixing. Knowledge is power, and they want to keep all the power. Recall election procedures were surprisingly straightforward once you understood the constitutional framework. Ohio law requires 51% homeowner petition signatures to trigger mandatory board removal elections. The critical insight: petitions must cite specific fiduciary breach allegations with supporting documentation, not vague complaints about personality conflicts. I created a resident education program that transformed incomprehensible legal concepts into practical knowledge any homeowner could understand and weaponize. Know Your Rights handouts included specific statute citations, sample documentation templates, and step-by-step guides for challenging arbitrary enforcement actions using the same systematic approach I'd use for troubleshooting industrial equipment failures. Every HOA victim needs this burned into permanent memory. Document everything, challenge everything with written demands for legal justification, and remember that board members are elected servants who work for homeowners, not tin-pot dictators running personal kingdoms. Most HOA abuse succeeds because residents don't realize they have legal nuclear weapons at their disposal. Marcus Webb had been constructing his own investigation parallel to our legal case, and his findings added rocket fuel to our community organizing efforts. His documentary evidence package included timeline analysis, financial connection mapping, and victim testimonials from 3 neighborhoods where Veronica's operation had systematically destroyed families. The media strategy combined traditional journalism credibility with modern social media amplification power. Local TV coverage would legitimize our claims for elderly residents who trusted television news above internet sources, while viral social media content would reach younger homeowners and national HOA reform advocates. Several national organizations had already expressed interest based on preliminary case details. Technical documentation provided the objective proof that would destroy Veronica's operation in any courtroom. Professional surveyor certification confirmed my sign placement entirely within property boundaries, measured to quarter-inch precision. Municipal engineering department provided written certification that sprinkler warning signs were legally mandatory for systems exceeding 30 psi pressure, required safety equipment, not optional suggestions. Property assessment revealed my home value had increased 12% since installing the improvements Veronica claimed were destroying neighborhood aesthetics. Professional appraisal documentation obliterated her property value protection justification with objective market data. Alliance building accelerated once residents realized they weren't isolated victims but targets of systematic fraud. Regular strategy sessions in my workshop created an unstoppable coalition, with the comforting smell of wood stain mixing with righteous determination. 23 residents confirmed selective enforcement patterns, united against organized abuse of authority. Financial intelligence gathering revealed HOA treasury mismanagement that added criminal dimensions to our case. Legal expenses had increased 340% since Veronica's election, with consultant payments flowing to shell companies connected to board members. Reserve funds had been depleted for enforcement enhancement programs that existed only in Veronica's imagination. Evidence preservation became military-grade operation, documentation copied to multiple secure locations, digital files backed up to cloud storage with attorney access, physical evidence stored in safety deposit boxes with maintained chain of custody for federal prosecution. That Friday evening, standing in my workshop surrounded by organized legal chaos, I listened to my sprinklers activate on schedule. 24 zones of perfectly legal irrigation requiring that perfectly legal warning sign that started this war. But staring at evidence boards documenting Veronica's systematic destruction of property rights, I realized something profound had happened. This wasn't about my house anymore. This was a revolution that would protect every American homeowner from HOA tyranny. Veronica's desperation revealed itself at 2:17 a.m. on a Tuesday that smelled like impending rain and criminal stupidity. I was jolted awake by the sharp crack of metal under stress, a sound every engineer recognizes as catastrophic system failure. My sprinkler system's main valve had been deliberately severed with bolt cutters, flooding Mrs. Patterson's prize rose garden and creating the water damage incident Veronica desperately needed for her next attack. By 6 a.m., an emergency violation notice appeared on my door like a badly written death threat. Immediate citation for property damage to community assets and neighboring properties due to negligent maintenance of illegal irrigation modifications. The woman had sabotaged my system, then blamed me for the damage with the shamelessness of an arsonist complaining about smoke alarms. But I'd learned to think like a chess master playing against a checkers amateur. Security cameras with night vision capability had captured every second of her midnight crime spree. A figure in dark clothing using professional bolt cutters at precisely 2:15 a.m. The footage was Hollywood quality clear, showing deliberate destruction of properly maintained equipment. Better yet, cell phone tower data placed Veronica's device at my location during the exact time frame. Digital breadcrumbs that would make federal prosecutors salivate. Veronica's next move proved she was operating on pure panic instead of strategy. She filed a false police report claiming I'd vandalized my own property for sympathy manipulation, alleging mental instability requiring wellness checks and involuntary property inspection. The responding detective arrived with a social services representative, clearly expecting to find an unhinged homeowner having a breakdown. Instead, they discovered a methodical engineer with comprehensive documentation, crystal-clear security footage, and an attorney on speed dial. Detective Morrison's expression shifted from bored routine to professional interest as I presented evidence of systematic harassment, insurance fraud, and criminal conspiracy spanning multiple jurisdictions. "Ma'am, you might want to lawyer up," he told Veronica when she arrived, expecting to witness my arrest. Within 30 minutes, they'd opened a criminal investigation into her activities instead of mine. But Veronica's desperation campaign was just getting started. Anonymous intimidation letters flooded neighborhood mailboxes like propaganda leaflets, warning about property value destruction caused by troublemaker residents who refused to respect community standards. The psychological warfare was designed to isolate supporters by making resistance seem financially suicidal for families worried about their biggest investment. Several elderly homeowners immediately distanced themselves from our alliance, fear replacing the righteous anger they'd shown during our workshops. Mrs. Rodriguez stopped her friendly evening walks past my house. Even Winston, Mrs. Patterson's ancient beagle, seemed to sense the neighborhood's toxic atmosphere, his usual tail-wagging greetings replaced by nervous panting and quick retreats. The employment sabotage attack hit where I was most vulnerable. Veronica contacted my company's HR department with fabricated harassment allegations, claiming I'd been disrupting workplace productivity through obsessive persecution of volunteer community leaders. Corporate demanded an immediate investigation that threatened my 23-year engineering career. My supervisor, Dave, called me into his office wearing the expression of someone forced to discuss embarrassing medical conditions. "Legal department's asking uncomfortable questions," he said, clearly wishing he was reviewing technical drawings instead of personal drama. "They're worried about liability exposure if this situation escalates into workplace violence." The subtext was crystal clear: resolve this quietly or start updating your resume. Veronica's financial warfare strategy launched with a special assessment of $1,200 per household for legal expenses necessitated by frivolous challenges from disruptive residents. 15% of families immediately paid rather than risk lien complications, creating a war chest that would fund additional attacks against anyone questioning her authority. The psychological brilliance was undeniable and morally repugnant, turned neighbors against each other financially, making resistance too expensive for working families to sustain. Fear became more effective than any legal threat. But her evidence destruction campaign crossed from harassment into serious federal crimes. Original HOA files mysteriously vanished from the community center's supposedly secure filing cabinet. The computer system experienced a catastrophic failure that eliminated 18 months of digital meeting records. Board members claimed routine maintenance had caused irreparable data loss, conveniently destroying documentation of every illegal decision they'd made. Fortunately, Mrs. Patterson's librarian paranoia had created multiple backup systems beyond Veronica's reach. Every document existed in secure locations, but her willingness to tamper with evidence revealed someone who understood she was facing potential federal prison time. The online reputation assassination targeted my professional credibility with military precision. Anonymous reviews attacked my engineering business on platforms from LinkedIn to Google, featuring detailed fabrications about negligent property maintenance and neighborhood terrorism. Social media accounts created specifically to destroy my character flooded search results with disinformation. Digital forensics traced every attack back to IP addresses connected to Veronica's real estate office, but immediate damage was done. 2 decades of professional reputation built through reliable engineering work was being systematically destroyed by someone whose greatest achievement was passing a real estate licensing exam. Legal intimidation escalated when Veronica's attorney sent threatening letters to my employer, mortgage company, and credit agencies. Each letter demanded I sign comprehensive gag orders preventing future legal action, essentially surrendering all constitutional rights in exchange for stopping her harassment campaign. That night in my workshop, surrounded by evidence of escalating felonies, I listened to hastily repaired sprinklers working overtime to save my drought-stressed lawn. The familiar smell of WD-40 mixed with grim satisfaction as I realized something crucial about Veronica's desperation tactics. Every crime she committed strengthened our federal case. Every piece of evidence tampering added years to potential prison sentences. Every escalation proved the systematic nature of her criminal enterprise. She wasn't just digging her own grave, she was using industrial equipment and working around the clock to finish faster. Veronica's final gambit arrived disguised as democracy, but reeked of desperation and forged documentation. She called a special emergency board meeting with exactly 24 hours notice, the legal minimum under Ohio HOA statutes, timed to maximize chaos and minimize organized opposition. The agenda contained one explosive item: emergency rule adoption for community safety and property protection. The proposed rule was retroactive tyranny disguised as legal procedure. Enhanced compliance enforcement with penalty structures applicable to all past, present, and future violations regardless of previous resolution status. She was trying to legitimize 18 months of illegal fines by changing rules after the fact, like declaring speeding tickets valid for driving before speed limits existed. Her desperation had made her sloppy in ways that would make federal prosecutors weep with joy. Veronica attempted vote stacking using proxy representatives, complete strangers who arrived in a chartered bus that smelled like cigarettes and legal fraud. 8 people I'd never seen presented notarized documents claiming voting rights for properties they'd never visited, let alone owned. The meeting location mysteriously moved from the community center to her real estate office conference room, capacity artificially limited to 12 people. When I arrived with 37 Alliance members, she claimed fire code restrictions prevented additional attendance. Her security guard looked like strip mall parking lot security, but I'd studied emergency meeting procedures like nuclear reactor safety protocols. This meeting violates Section 4.12 of our charter, I announced, producing laminated copies of original 1987 HOA documents. Emergency meetings require adequate public accommodation or mandatory postponement to appropriate venue. Veronica's face flushed fire engine red. The meeting will proceed under emergency authority. There is no emergency authority for rule changes, interrupted Margaret Steinberg, arriving with constitutional law and the predatory smile of someone about to destroy a career. Emergency provisions apply exclusively to immediate safety hazards, not administrative convenience. The crowd outside grew larger as word spread through our communication network. 34 residents gathered with homemade signs reading "Accountability Now" and "Stop HOA Corruption," creating peaceful demonstration that attracted local police expecting civil disturbance but finding organized citizens exercising constitutional rights. Officer Martinez recognized the situation immediately. "Ma'am, these folks have property rights to attend meetings affecting their investments, move to public venue, or postpone until proper notice." Forced to relocate to the high school auditorium, Veronica's proxy voter scheme was about to explode spectacularly. I'd researched every name on her proxy list, cross-referencing property records and voter registrations with federal investigation thoroughness. When she called votes from designated property representatives, I challenged each authorization with documentation. "James Morrison, proxy for 847 Maple Street, except property records show 847 Maple doesn't exist in our development," I announced, producing county surveyor maps. Sarah Williams, proxy for Henderson property, except Mrs. Henderson is sitting right there and never authorized representation. 8 of 11 proxy votes were ruled invalid due to fraudulent documentation. The remaining 3 belonged to elderly residents deceived about what they'd signed, authorization forms disguised as routine HOA correspondence. Marcus Webb arrived with Channel 7 camera crew, turning our neighborhood meeting into live television coverage. Social media streams broadcast proceedings to HOA reform groups nationwide, creating real-time documentation of systematic corruption for federal court evidence. The constitutional smoking gun came when Mrs. Patterson produced original 1987 charter documents. Emergency rule changes require 72 hours written notice, she read with founding authority. Changes affecting fines require public hearing with 14 days notice and 67% homeowner approval through written ballot, not board decree. Veronica's entire procedural approach wasn't just wrong, it was constitutionally impossible under governing documents. Margaret served papers live on television. Temporary restraining order issued by federal Judge Harrison, she announced, documents sparkling under camera lights. All rule changes frozen pending federal investigation into civil rights violations. All existing fines suspended until constitutional review completed. Community response was immediate and overwhelming. Vote of no confidence passed 28-2. Only Veronica and her remaining puppet dissented. Recall petition signatures exceeded 67% threshold as residents lined up with freedom voting enthusiasm. But Veronica's public meltdown provided perfect ending to systematic abuse. Captured on multiple cameras, she screamed accusations about outside agitators and property value terrorists while threatening personal lawsuits. Her breakdown escalated until police intervention prevented physical confrontation. "You people don't understand what you've done," she shrieked as Officer Martinez escorted her out. "This neighborhood will be worthless." The irony was lost on her. The only threat to property values was her systematic destruction of community trust through criminal enforcement tactics. That night, residents took control through emergency interim leadership appointment. All enforcement suspended pending legal review. Neighborhood atmosphere shifted from fear to cautious celebration as people realized they'd defeated organized tyranny. Standing in my workshop, surrounded by victory evidence, I listened to sprinklers activating on schedule. The familiar sound reminded me how this war had started with one small warning sign and evolved into federal civil rights case. Tomorrow, federal court with cameras rolling and the whole country watching. The high school auditorium buzzed with tension thick enough to cut with a surveyor's transit. Mandatory annual HOA meeting, but this wasn't your typical discussion about snow removal contracts and landscaping budgets. 73 of 89 households represented, highest attendance in 20 years. With local media crews positioning cameras like this, was the Super Bowl of suburban justice. 2 hours before the meeting, Marcus Webb's investigative expose had aired on Channel 7, revealing the full scope of Veronica's criminal enterprise. Documentary evidence showed systematic fraud affecting 4 neighborhoods, with $127,000 in questionable HOA expenditures traced to shell companies connected to strategic property acquisitions. Federal real estate fraud investigation officially announced during the 6 o'clock news. The smell of industrial-strength disinfectant mixed with nervous sweat and righteous anticipation as residents filed in. Mrs. Patterson arrived early, clutching her evidence folders like sacred texts. Mr. Kim wore his military dress uniform. Full decorations, including the Purple Heart his son had earned posthumously. Jessica brought her kids, wanting them to witness democracy in action. I took the podium at exactly 7 p.m. with a 20-minute presentation that would either vindicate 18 months of legal warfare or destroy my credibility forever. Professional slide deck, timeline documentation, audio recordings of Veronica's bribery attempts, financial analysis correlating violations with property investment potential. Everything organized with engineering precision. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice carrying across the auditorium with surprising steadiness. "What started as a simple sprinkler warning sign has uncovered a federal conspiracy to systematically steal your homes." The timeline presentation revealed Veronica's operation like a slow-motion explosion. 18 months of targeted enforcement, financial connections between violations and investor purchases, documented coordination with out-of-state property acquisition companies. Each slide built the case that we weren't dealing with overzealous community management. This was organized crime disguised as HOA governance. Community testimonials followed like prosecution witnesses in a criminal trial. 12 residents shared personal stories of selective enforcement, financial intimidation, and systematic harassment. Mr. Kim's voice cracked, describing how Veronica had fined him for honoring his war-dead son. Jessica detailed children's chalk art violations designed to force single mothers into financial submission. Mrs. Patterson revealed document destruction and evidence tampering attempts. But the nuclear moment came when I played Veronica's recorded bribery attempt. "We can make this all go away," her voice echoed through the auditorium speakers with crystal clarity. "Drop your challenges, sign this community standards agreement, and all fines disappear. Continue fighting, and you'll lose your house to legal costs that'll bankrupt you." The collective gasp from 73 homeowners sounded like air being sucked from the room. Federal prosecutor Amanda Smith rose from the back row with the theatrical timing of someone who'd been waiting for this moment. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm announcing criminal charges filed today in federal court. RICO conspiracy, civil rights violations under federal fair housing statutes, wire fraud, mail fraud, and systematic deprivation of constitutional rights under color of law. Here's what every American homeowner needs burned into permanent memory. HOA discrimination patterns qualify for federal civil rights prosecution when board members systematically target residents based on financial vulnerability or inability to fight back. The Justice Department takes property rights seriously, especially when local officials abuse authority for personal profit." Veronica made one final desperate attempt to justify her actions. "Everything I did protected property values," she insisted, her voice shaking with the desperation of someone watching their empire collapse. "Selective enforcement was educational prioritization. I never received any financial benefit from—" I interrupted with certified bank records showing her profit from forced sales. "Strategic property acquisitions paid you $89,000 in commissions from enforcement-motivated transactions. These documents prove coordination with investors before violations were even issued." The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable, and broadcast live on local television. Shell company records, email coordination with investors, systematic targeting of financially vulnerable homeowners. Everything documented with the thoroughness of a federal investigation, because that's exactly what it had become. The community response was swift and unanimous. Standing ovation as my presentation concluded, followed by unanimous vote removing Veronica and her entire complicit board. Emergency interim leadership elected from alliance members, all pending fines and liens immediately suspended, legal fund established to support affected homeowners. But the mic drop moment came when federal agents served search warrants during the meeting. "Veronica Ashworth, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, mail fraud, and civil rights violations," Agent Morrison announced as handcuffs clicked with the finality of 18 months of criminal behavior. The perp walk outside the auditorium was captured by every television camera in the tri-state area. National news outlets picked up the story within hours. Social media #HOA corruption trended for 48 hours as similar victims shared their stories nationwide. Congressional representatives commented on urgent need for HOA reform legislation. I found myself interviewed on morning television programs, explaining how one sprinkler warning sign had exposed a multi-state criminal conspiracy. The new board's first official act: rescind all Veronica-era rule changes, issue public apology to affected homeowners, commit to transparent governance with live-streamed meetings and public financial reporting. Standing outside the auditorium afterward, surrounded by neighbors who'd become allies in the fight for property rights, I listened to police sirens fading into the distance. The smell of fresh autumn air mixed with the satisfaction of justice served and democracy restored. My small aluminum warning sign had started a revolution that would protect homeowners nationwide from HOA tyranny. 6 months later, the smell of fresh paint and new beginnings filled our community center as residents gathered for the first Willowbrook Freedom Festival. The legal aftermath had been swift and satisfying. Veronica received 18 months in federal prison, $127,000 in restitution from seized assets, and permanent real estate license revocation across 3 states. Civil lawsuit settlements compensated every affected homeowner. My settlement covered legal fees plus enough to finally finish restoring that Camaro. Turns out fighting federal conspiracy pays better than engineering consulting when you win. Community healing began immediately. Our new board implemented a resident bill of rights with transparency requirements, documented enforcement procedures, and live-streamed meetings with public financial reporting. Democracy had returned to Willowbrook, and it felt like breathing fresh air after months of suffocation. My sprinkler warning sign received official municipal recognition as a community safety feature. The mayor personally presented the award in my front yard, thanking me for proactive hazard notification exemplifying responsible ownership. But the real victory was watching replica signs appear throughout the neighborhood as solidarity symbols, visible reminders that we'd successfully resisted authority abuse. Personal transformation came unexpectedly. Fighting corruption had awakened passion for property rights advocacy I never knew existed. I completed paralegal certification specializing in HOA law, turning weekend research into professional consulting. My workshop education sessions evolved into statewide business providing pro bono help to abuse victims. Ironically, Veronica's attempt to destroy my life had created more meaningful work than 23 years of corporate engineering. Community improvements flourished once corruption was eliminated. Surplus funds previously stolen through fraudulent fees funded actual enhancements. Community garden with resident volunteers, annual Resident Rights Day festival celebrating democratic participation, and scholarship fund sending students to law school focused on property rights. The ripple effects extended beyond Willowbrook. 3 neighboring HOAs adopted our transparency reforms. State legislature introduced comprehensive reform legislation, and national organizations use us as model democratic governance. Documentary rights were optioned by streaming service for series about Americans fighting constitutional battles at local level. Most importantly, personal relationships healed and grew. My partnership with Jessica evolved from alliance building to something deeper, founded on shared experience fighting for justice. Her children play safely in our yard, drawing chalk art without violation fears. Mr. Kim's flag flies proudly, officially recognized as patriotic expression enhancing community character. Property values increased 23% since Veronica's removal. Eliminating harassment and criminal board members actually improves desirability. My home became local landmark representing successful resistance to tyranny. Financial freedom felt as satisfying as legal victory. Every evening, I listened to familiar sprinklers activating on schedule. That sound reminds me how the biggest victories sometimes start with smallest stands on principle. My tiny warning sign protected more than pedestrians. It protected an entire community from systematic oppression. The sign still stands 18 inches from sidewalk, 8 inches tall, perfectly legal, and proudly serving its original purpose. But now it represents something larger. Proof that when good people organize and fight smart, justice wins. Here's what you need to remember. Your property rights matter, your community voice counts, and bullies in business suits are still just bullies. When regular folks refuse intimidation and demand accountability from elected officials, democracy works exactly like founders intended. Mrs. Patterson's garden gnomes stand among prize roses without aesthetic violations. Mrs. Henderson's bird feeders attract children and wildlife, creating neighborhood gathering spots that build real community. Winston still jingles past my window each morning, but now his walks include stops at the community garden where neighbors actually talk to each other. The workshop where this all began still smells like sawdust and motor oil, but now it's also headquarters for helping other communities fight HOA tyranny. My evidence boards have been replaced by law books and case files from families across 3 states who've reached out for help defeating their own corrupt boards. That's the real legacy of our victory. Not just saving one neighborhood, but proving the system works when citizens refuse to accept abuse from petty tyrants. Next week, I'm sharing how one homeowner's Ring doorbell exposed their HOA president's drug operation. Sometimes the real criminals are making the rules, and sometimes stopping them requires more than warning signs. It requires people willing to fight for what's right. What would you do if neighbors tried stealing your home using fake rules? Drop a comment sharing your HOA nightmare. You're not alone, and there are solutions. Hit subscribe because these stories prove standing up works, but only when people refuse staying silent. Remember, when communities unite against injustice, the good guys win. Keep fighting the good fight, and never let anyone convince you that property rights don't matter. Until next time, stay strong and keep those sprinklers running legally.
That's all for today's HOA madness. If watching justice serve itself made your day, smash that like button, share your thoughts down below, and make sure you're subscribed. More outrageous neighborhood showdowns are just around the corner.